Hi there. I've been asked to continue these chats. People seem to enjoy them. So I thought I would kind of concentrate today on teaching. I love teaching. I love it. Never expected to be a teacher. I can blame Balanchine for that, but I'll get into it in a minute. I have been giving some private classes to a fantastic 15-year-old new guy, lots of talent, and I don't usually give privates, although when I was young, starting out around 10 and 11, I had a lot of good privates from Maria Charisse. And she was the sister of Nico Charisse, who was the husband of Sid Charisse, and who trained Sid Charisse, and then he married her. Very Balanchine-like, I must say. And part of this family of 11 dancing children, the Charisse family that toured Europe, did vaudeville, but they were trained ballet dancers. And my teacher was Catherine Etienne, my first ballet teacher, who was Catherine Charisse. So I have had privates. I also had a lot of privates from Anton Dolan, which is fantastic. I had 6 weeks of private classes from him when I was 18, right before I joined the New York City Ballet. Actually, I think I just turned 19 when I started having classes. So it was only a couple months before I joined New York City Ballet that Anton Dolan was teaching me. So I do understand there's a lot of value in private classes. I just particularly don't give them, not that I don't want to, it's just that I very rarely come across dancers that I want to spend that much time with. I love teaching students, and I never knew I would. And again, now I'll get into the Balanchine part of this. When Balanchine brought me to New York when I was 19, I was 19 in a few months into my 19th year. And he brought me to New York to choreograph for the school. He saw some ballets I did in LA, and he liked them, and he wanted me to choreograph, which was fine, because I wanted to choreograph. So he brought me back to SAB, his school, and immediately I started choreographing, and I've gone into that in other chats. Well, within a matter of weeks, Balanchine asked me to teach the boys' class, the younger intermediate, beginning intermediate boys. They were all around 11 and 12 years old, and I'd never taught before, ever. But Balanchine thought it was good for my education to teach. And one of the young students, interestingly, is Jean-Pierre Froelich, who then became a top soloist with the New York City Ballet. He danced Apollo under Balanchine's direction, became a particular favorite of Jerome Robbins, and I must say his first sailor variation in Fancy Free, I don't know how it can be beat. I'm sure other people do it fantastically, but it's on video. You should check it out. Jean-Pierre Froelich. His attack and his verve and his technique, it's just flawless, and his personality. So, but he was one of my first students when he was 11, and also Victor Castelli, who became a particular friend of mine in the company and one of Balanchine's favorite. It's when when Balanchine died, unfortunately, Victor had some problems, became a ballet master, but I'll get into all that in another chat. But so Balanchine had me starting to teach, and then after a week or two of teaching the boys, he started having me teach what was called Late C class, which was a mixed class. Usually the boys and girls had separate classes, except for 3 times a week in the evening and once on Saturday, and we call that the mixed C. And that was a advanced class where the boys and girls took together. And Balanchine asked me to start teaching one of those a week. I don't know how to teach. But he had me teach, and he came in and watched, and he said, dear, you don't have to give so many different steps. Concentrate just on a few steps and really make them work and clean it up. And I went, okay. And I hadn't even, at this point, even been in Balanchine's class. This was before I started taking company class, before I was a member of the company. I was at the school, and I was choreographing at the school, but I wasn't a professional. But he had me teaching Late C. And the first class, this was so funny, my very first Late C class, who walks in but Allegra Kent and Jacques d'Amboise to take class? Two of the biggest stars of the New York City Ballet, and a lot of times the professionals, the dancers in the company, would take the Late C class, or sometimes the men's class with Stanley Williams especially. But I just froze when Allegra and Jacques walked in to take my class. And I gave it, and they were fine, and they did everything, and it was very amusing. And then they would come back for more classes. Then all of a sudden, Balanchine had me starting to teach the Pas De Deux class. So I taught some Pas De Deux classes, and then who shows up at Melissa Hayden and Jacques d'Amboise? And I'm like, oh my God, Melissa Hayden in my class. But Violette Verdi came to my classes, and then when Balanchine was unavailable, he would have me teach his class, the company class. Now this was like a year or two later, after I'd been in the company a couple of years and had already started doing principal roles. But when he was late or something, or if he had a meeting and he couldn't get out of it, or an orchestra rehearsal, he liked to go down and listen to the orchestra rehearse all the time. He'd say, Johnny, you start, or somebody, but his secretary, or somebody would say, Johnny, Mr. B wants you to start. And sometimes he'd show up for class, and sometimes he wouldn't come in, and so I would teach the whole class. And then when we were on tour, sometimes it's more difficult on tour. He had a lot of things to do, and the dancers, if he wasn't in there in the first 5 minutes, somebody would say, John, start, teach, just start. So it was all very casual, but it got very comfortable feeling, and I think most of the dancers felt good about it. So everybody took my class. It wasn't like anybody boycotted my class. So basically that was it about the classes, and I tried to teach everything that Balanchine taught me. And then of course when I started my Los Angeles ballet, I taught every class. Every now and then I'd experiment with maybe a guest teacher. We'd have a Russian come in named Lupov, and it was quite different. It was heavier class, and I thought it would be good for the dancers to have a change. And he was quite amusing, and his wife played the piano, and she would correct the dancers while he was teaching, and he'd yell at her, shut up, Nina, and it was quite crazy. But after a week or so, the dancers came to me and said that they really didn't want him to teach because the class was too heavy to do what the rehearsals were, which was mostly Balanchine style, allegro brillante and things like that. So we had to let him go because basically the dancers wouldn't take his class. And but other than that, Violette Verdi would teach in the summer, and Melissa Hayden, and they had wonderful things to say, and it was all the same Balanchine family, which is great. And I thought it was good for the dancers to have different input from different people when it was all the same Balanchine style, as it were. It wasn't good to bring in somebody like the Russian or something so totally different, and they didn't like it anyway. So the Balanchine classes that I teach are, depending on the company, I mean, I had to adjust them for some companies in Europe, certainly, but it only takes about a week for the dancers to get into it. And then I've had it always happen where the European dancers, at first, if they didn't like it, they would come up to me later and say, this was fantastic because we feel we're on our leg more and we can move faster, easier. And it's all due to Balanchine training. So I'm finishing this with some Petit Allegro from a company class that I was teaching in Montreal. The director there for 16 years, Gradimir Pankov, would bring me up to Montreal to rehearse the principals in their very classical Nutcracker by Fernand Nault. Incredible production, really opulent, can rival New York City ballets. It's that gorgeous. But the choreography is very busy, very fast, totally classical, but very fast and very busy. And the dancers really have to be at the top of their game to pull it off so it looks good. Otherwise, it looks kind of messy. So I would teach and rehearse the principals. Yeah, so when I teach, I really can only teach students that are, determined to make a career and will work hard. Which is why I like to go up to Portland, to the Portland Ballet, which is a school company run by two former dancers from my Los Angeles Ballet, Nancy Davis and Jim Lane. Year after year, they turn out incredibly good dancers, and they work so hard, and it's really a joy. And in closing, it's sort of like people thank me when I teach, but it's really, I should thank them because I'm the one getting the joy out of it. I must say, like this new boy, which I'll post more videos later, the other day I taught him a class. It was only my third class with him. And I got him to do 6 perfect pirouettes with his hands on his hips. He needed a bit more speed, and so I know all these tricks, of how to where to put the hands in certain little ways to get students and dancers to do something they didn't think they could do. So anyway, so he did 6 absolutely perfect pirouettes, finished on half point, and he, while he was still up there, he gave me this look of shock that he'd actually done that, because he was a very slow turner. He could turn maybe 3 or 4 turns when he was lucky, but they were slow and not very good placement. But I gave him the corrections, I gave him the tricks, and he just whipped around perfect 6 gorgeous pirouettes. So, I mean, that fills my heart. It really does. So anyway, so enjoy this little clip from the Grand Ballet Canadien in this little Petit Allegro combination. And the thing about ballet or dance, it's really all about love. It's corny, I know, sounds corny, but it's really all about love. And that's the thing why I'm so loyal to Balanchine, because he was all about it. Didn't talk about it, but every action he did was basically love of the art, love of us, love of the music. It just oozed out of every pore. It was a positive environment, the New York City Ballet, under his tenure. It was a very positive Camelot kind of thing. And it can come back. So, end of this chat. I hope you enjoyed it. Enjoy this little bit of the Grand Ballet Canadien and a little Petit Allegro. Bye.
And